We are rolling. Skrizz and Adam, episode 7. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who has been listening to the podcast. We are launched, locked and loaded, very cool. Adam, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's good to be back in studio. It was good to have you up in Saratoga again a few days ago, and yeah, we appreciate everyone that's been listening, commenting, sharing their thoughts on it. So we love and appreciate you guys.
Yeah, it's the rise. We're starting somewhere, and we're
hopefully going somewhere else.
Only up. We're plummeting downhill. Episode
Either
10,
that
it's over.
or it's over.
Okay, cool. So you drove down from Saratoga today, and we kind of hopped on a call on the way down, thinking about what we wanted to talk about. I had something kind of pop up on my radar, and it was funny because the idea you had for the show felt like was the exact same kind of topic. So the general topic we're going to talk about, or what we want to discuss, is, for me, what is something that is shocking or people just don't know about the music industry? And for you, the same exact thing. What is something that's truly shocking or people just don't know about the startup business? So I'll kick it off. I'm pretty pumped about this one, actually. I truly believe that probably 99.9999999% of people that even think about the record business do not know this, and that 95% of artists and at least like entry-level managers don't really know this. So I'd say before streaming blew up in 2015, I mean, the goal was to get a record deal. Everyone wants to get a record deal. It's been, probably since the 1950s all the way through the 2000s. If you want to make it as an artist, you need to get a record deal. They were the gatekeepers that controlled radio, got you in stores, got you on MTV, everything like that. But it's always been known that like record labels are shady and they rape you financially, and it's like selling your soul, whatever. But no one really knew the financial breakdown of that. So I think what's most shocking I'll tell you about is the entry, the format of an entry level record deal is essentially the worst bank loan in the history of bank loans.
So talk me through that.
Sure. So this is, think of it this way. Say you got a hot song, you got a super hot song, you're a brand new artist, and you want to get signed to a record deal, and they're going to give you a $1 million advance. So obviously everyone's thrilled to get $1 million. The $1 million advance, and you're going to get something standard would be like an 87-13 split, which already sounds terrible. So think of it this way. You're thinking that out of the profits, the record label is going to make 87%, and you're going to make 13. Sometimes it's a lot lower than that, but that's pretty standard. So what do you assume that means? You got $1 million. What do you assume that means?
So right off the bat, you say 87-13 split.
Yeah.
So you get $1 million.
Sure.
I would assume if you turn that $1 million into $2 million, so you have $1 million profit.
Sure.
I would assume that they get 870,000, and you get 130,000.
Question for you: does that sound good or does it sound terrible?
Depends. I mean, if you need the money, you need the money. Because the two ways to look at it would be, one, would you have been able to make that $1 million profit without them and without their capital,
Sure.
and without their resources, or could you have done that on your own?
Whatever. It's an open discussion. The part is, you're 100% wrong. That's not the way it works.
Right.
It's not the way it works at all. I had a friend who was worked in music forever and just learned this through a TikTok. They recoup the $1 million out of the 13% royalty, which makes no fucking sense at all. So hear me out. Essentially, the record label, in order for you to become out of debt for your $1 million, the record label has to make $7.7 million, and then you start profiting. For every $1 million, then they take 870 and you take 130. So
Okay,
essentially, they will make $10 million before you make $2 million.
Yep. So let's walk back a little bit.
Sure.
So first, where does that 7.7 number come from?
Sales. And who the fuck is gonna, what? Most artists are never gonna hit that. So essentially, an artist can have a number one hit song on the radio and be touring like crazy and be in debt.
Right, but
that's the model.
But even though why? So my example,
Sure.
They give you $1 million, you make $1 million. Why do they not get the 870,000 and you get the 130? Why does it start at like 7 million?
Because it's recouping out of the 13%. So essentially, the 83, no matter what, the 87, no matter what, always goes to them. So essentially, the 13% has to add up to $1 million.
Gotcha,
13% of 7.
So you're gotcha.
13% of 7.7 equals $1 million, and then you've recouped. So out of the gate, they're making an 83% profit, no matter what.
Okay, and that makes sense now. And that's wild. It makes sense, but it doesn't make sense.
It's a loan at about 800%.
Right.
So essentially, you have to make 800% of what you were given in order to. And even in a more favorable deal where it's 25/75 and it's a recoupment deal, that's still fucking terrible. It's really, really, really bad. Now I'm going to play devil's advocate. I had dinner with my lawyer a while back, and he was talking about, it's like, it just kind of is what it is. It's like they're assuming the risk. So if it's 1 in 20 artists are going to make it big, I'm sure Bruno Mars, I think, probably had a similar deal or something like that. He ended up making, yielding $100 million. The label kept like 85 of it. You know what I mean? And that funded everybody else. So I think most people just have no idea that's how it works. And essentially, when it is like selling your soul, it really is like they might have the resources to get you off the ground, but from there, you're going to have to figure out how to make money.
Right. So, okay. All right. So that is a little bit different than even what I was about to ask you.
Sure.
Because that last point you just made. You're saying they give you the money and then they're like, all right, bud, figure it out.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly what it is.
Why they're incentivized, though, to help you scale, help you grow, because the more money you make, the more money they make.
So that's in theory. I think a big shift in the music industry happened in like the 2015, like when I was on Atlantic Records. I remember her sitting down with a mastering engineer who was like done all the big stuff on the radio. And he said for the first time in his career, he's noticed that the record labels allocate 95% of their resources only to the top 5%. So essentially their model is give a bunch of kids $150,000, $200,000, $300,000, do like 20, 30 of them a year with really bad deals, and they're going to fight for their life, and whichever one makes it to the top pays for all the rest of them. That's the basic model.
So basically, and I'm curious how you felt going into your deal with Atlantic. Like,
well, first of all, I had no idea that, like, I knew I had a good deal, but like it was a good deal by that standard. Like, that's the standard. That's crazy to think.
When did you realize it wasn't a good deal? Or was it not a good deal? Was it always a good deal?
In 2014, it was a good deal. There was literally no other way of selling records in 2014. I mean, there were like free cases like Insane Clown Posse or jam bands, but I didn't fall into any of those categories. In 2014, there was no way of selling records. Like I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. It's like, if I want to have a hit record in, I don't know, UK or whatever, you need the label sending a sales team out there that's literally saying, convincing the stores to put my record on the shelf and hang a flyer and play. Like now it's literally just like push a button, Spotify. And then like if people in UK like it, they're going to like it. That just is what it is, you know?
So when you're working with or talking to a new artist, and they're asking your advice on getting a record label or not getting a record label, what do you say? Do it, don't do it? What's your advice?
I gave it advice to a girl 2 years ago. Essentially the advice was, if it doesn't work, you're going to hate your record label. And if it does work, you're going to hate your record label. That's it. That's the advice.
One of those famous lose-lose. It's the position we all want to be in.
It's like, I mean, think about it. I mean, I think it's why so many huge artists that signed off rip and became massive, like, there's always, like, they're always going into hibernation, or there's always drama, and there's always things. It's like, how do you live with yourself knowing you like this is, for me, this is why I am independent. This is the question everyone asks why I choose to be independent and I'm not signing again until I have huge leverage, is like, how do you live with yourself knowing that what you did generated $100 million and you made like 7? Like, how can you live with that?
To play devil's advocate, though, on that point, is a lot of times we need the capital to give us that boost.
Of course.
And if you don't have that capital, you can't grow. And even if you don't make a penny from it, like let's say you make $7 million and then nothing else after that.
Sure.
Just by getting to that point of making $7 million, your followers grew, your listeners
your brand
grew,
values,
brand grows,
for
all
sure.
that.
Oh, this is the exact logic of the record label. I mean, it's not like they're Satan. They're not like killing people. Maybe they are killing people in like basements. I don't really know. But I mean, the logic is justified. It's just like very high stakes risk taking, essentially.
I remember my main investor in my tech company, he always said it's better to have a small piece of a big pie versus a big piece of a small pie. And I
totally disagree with that.
Why is that? You'd rather
you
have
could eventually turn that small pie into a big pie. I mean, you're saying at the end of the day when like the world comes to an end? Or,
yeah, like
when
would you
you're dead?
rather have 1% of $1 billion or 100% of $200,000?
I mean, that's a really specific example, so it's a no-brainer. Yeah.
Right, but in a lot of situations, though, you need the capital or you need the resources to help get you to the next level. And once you get to that next level, then you just keep growing and growing and growing on top of that.
Sure. I mean, dude, it's a case by case. It's totally case by case. But back to the original question, I think people don't realize that literally there are so many artists that have no money. Like straight up have no money. And legally they're in debt, actually. And you think they're popping.
So, right, to that point, let me ask a question then based off of that.
Sure.
So, how many artists, let's just say 10 artists,
Sure.
roughly, 10 artists that don't have money.
Sure.
How many of those, if they had $1 million or whatever that amount of capital you need to like start to get yourself to the next level, if they had the capital, they'd be well-known and top 40 type artists.
No, I'm talking about the opposite. I'm talking about people that are well-known that have no money is what I'm talking about. I mean,
That
they're like,
have a record label or don't have a record label?
I'm talking about like artists that have hit songs on the radio and are
Gotcha.
signed to a
Right, and
label.
you assume that they're killing
There
it.
are like legends out there who are broke.
Right.
Like literally broke.
Broke because they're not making money off their record label, or broke because like they're doing stupid shit with their money?
Both. Literally both. I mean, like a lot of rappers have no money. Like straight up have no money.
Let's just focus on the record label piece instead of just like
Sure.
doing stupid
But
shit
I'm
with their
focusing
money.
on, like they're just not making money off their records. Like,
Right, and you would just
like-
assume they are.
Like artists that signed initially and they got like that $2 million and then like that $2 million is gone and 6 years later it's like, I have no other forms of income.
And your likeness.
I remember seeing
Cool.
like a country artist. I was just whatever. I don't want to get too specific. Like a country artist who's like kind of a household name, and I would say he, she, so it's not gender specific. It's like on the radio constantly, and like I looked up what they made in a year, and it was like it's like might as well work at McDonald's. You know what I mean? They made like 30K. You know. And it was like, well, no, they fought for their life, got the record deal. They probably got 150K. Then COVID happened, so they're not playing shows. And even when they are playing shows, they want to make it seem big, so they're paying 5 musicians on stage, so they're not making any money, you know?
In every Spotify check they get, for example, again, 8713, roughly, just using those numbers.
No, every Spotify check is going straight to the label.
Right, straight to the label, and they're only disseminating money to the artist if they pass that certain threshold.
Which is super high. And the whole point is they want to give them another advance before they pass that threshold to constantly keep them in the red. That's the goal.
Most record deals are how long? 5 years, 2 years, 20 years?
I mean, dude, it can be forever. It's like till you recoup. It's called a recoupment deal. So it's until you get out of it.
Really? So
Yeah.
it just and they basically own
It's just
Skrizz
a bank
Adams.
loan. It's just a bank loan.
Interesting.
It's all just a really bad bank loan.
But by recoup, do you mean they recoup the $1 million that they gave you?
No, they
or-
recoup the 7.7. That's the whole point of what I'm trying to
That's
say.
absurd.
Recoupment means hitting 7.7 for every million.
So how'd you get out of it?
Oh, I just asked off. For me, so specifically for those who don't, I was in a record deal, and I just asked off. And I told them I wasn't giving the money back. I mean, everything comes down to legalities. Mine was a really weird case where, like, I just had a good lawyer who was just like, we're not giving the money back, and that's it. And they're like, that goes back to their thing, though. They're willing to take so many L's because when they hit it big, they hit it big.
It's the exact same thing with the venture capital startup world. Like
Yeah.
they don't mind losing 9 out of 10. They know 8 out of 10 at least startups that they invest in are going to fail.
Oh, totally.
They just want that one that's going to be a $5 billion exit, and that pays for everyone.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what this is. I think there was like an independent label. I don't remember. I don't want to speak incorrectly here, but there was like an independent label that signed a massive like metal band. And I think they had like the metal band was just so big that it funded essentially like 30 other failed artists on the label. So
What do most artists think about record labels? Like if I talk to 10 artists like you,
there was like a big shift. I will say, someone I work really closely with, who I really value their opinion. They were very pro record labels for like the first 8 years I knew them, and then 2019 came around, and they're like, yeah, this just ain't it. I mean, the big thing I love seeing now is all these rappers who have huge, like millions of followers on Instagram and Spotify and Apple, and this massive user base. They're all going indie now. And they release a song. So essentially, if they release a song and it gets 100 million streams, it's about $500,000 in their pocket. And they own it. They didn't need someone to make the record. It costs like a few $1,000. Some of them are producing the records themselves. It costs nothing. So it's like, what do I need an advance for? Just like, a lot of them are like, I am rich. I just want to get richer. And I don't want people getting in the way of what I do. A lot of, I forget that rapper Kyle recently just turned down like a $10 million, like, what do you call it? Re-up, renegotiating with his label. And he just said, nah, he just passed on it and just kept it himself.
Well, it's crazy. Like, one of the terms I always hated hearing, just because one of those like overused terms, like every industry has their overused terms.
Sure.
In the startup world, like democratizing is the most overused word. I hated it. I hated hearing it, but
I have no idea what that means.
Makes sense. Basically, it's like you're democratizing access. You're like giving everybody access to something. So like,
too many cooks in the kitchen is what we call it.
Yeah, like so it'll make more sense after I describe this. So basically, what social media has done is it's democratized like people not needing to work with a record label. Because if you blow yourself up on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, you don't need a record label anymore to blow you up because you already got 10 million
More specifically,
followers.
blow yourself up on Spotify or Apple or Amazon.
Sure.
That means you already blew.
You already did it. You already did what they're supposed to help you with.
That's exactly. You already are selling the records. It's already happening. Yeah,
and what's more valuable than anything is like if you do have the eyeballs, whether it's on a podcast, eyeballs, ears, whatever the hell you want to call it.
Shout out to everyone listening right now.
Yep, shout out. No matter what it is, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, that's money. Your brand is your capital. And if you don't need a record label, then you're good. What do you think the future is then of record labels? Because it seems like the value might be diluting a little bit.
So distribution label services is really big right now. So essentially like distribution deals are pretty standard right now. And those are just building up like crazy where it's like, I release the record, they get it in all the stores, they provide marketing services, they often give you advances, $30,000, $100,000, whatever, if you need money. And if you bring it to radio or whatever, they'll take 25% or they'll take 20 off the top. That's becoming very standard. And I think labels are going to smarten up. I think they already are. I'm not that involved, but where they're just taking a percentage. And I think that's just the name of the game. That's just like if you're already selling records, let me just help you sell records and take 50 to 10% or whatever.
That's much more the traditional model. Like if I'm looking to raise money, you have X percent and I have Y percent, but we're all rowing in the same direction.
Oh, for sure.
Or if we make $1, we're both going to make money, but we're going to make a different percentage of that dollar.
That being said, I don't think anyone's going to go into a situation like that unless they are already selling records. You know what I mean? Like I don't see Universal like for just an example of someone who's doing that. To my understanding, J Balvin, who's like the most streamed artist on earth, or top 3 most streamed artist on earth. He's Colombian, does like reggaeton music. It's huge. He has like a deal with Universal. They don't ever give him a dime. He funds his music videos. He funds everything, and they just make sure everyone hears his music, and they take 25% or something like that.
That's the way it should be.
But the name of the game is he's J Balvin. He's huge.
He's got the leverage.
Like I would love something like that. I don't think I could get something like that in a position. But I'm saying a brand new artist, like. That's why a brand new artist, it goes back to that giving advice to, a girl I knew who's signing a record label is like, if it doesn't work, you're going to hate him. If it works, you're going to hate him. But this is kind of your one shot because it's not working right now.
Right. Let me put a hypothetical out there. So
sure.
I'm a big fan and I don't give a shit about the person, Skrizz Adams.
Sure.
All I care about is I love his music. Sure. Love his music. Every time he puts out a new song, I'm all over it.
Sure, it's great.
He's the best.
Cool.
Do I want you to sign with a record label, or do I want you to be indie? Like, how am I going to get better music?
I know the exact question you're saying. It's a really, 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 really good question. Because that's the thing I constantly have to explain to people is like, I'm in a much better financial position than probably a lot of my peers who are on record. I mean, vast majority of my peers. I want to say it doesn't matter. I want to say as long as they keep I want to say the average person, if the song keeps showing up on Spotify every 4 weeks and you like the song, I don't know. Here's a question for you. If you see that the single came out a month ago and now it has 100 million streams, but you're not invested in Skrizz Adams, how do you feel about that?
I don't know if it makes a difference to me, but I can say with art, I can't think of an artist off the top of my head, but
my music's visible. The short question, my view out of the most minimal resources, I will make my music visible enough for everybody.
I don't even mean just making it visible. Like, I'm a huge fan, in this hypothetical example.
But I mean, if it was playing on the radio, you'd be fired up or something like that, but you're not invested in me, so I don't really know.
Right, but I'm saying more of like, is your music going to change? Like, you sign with the record label.
That.
Yes. So my whole thing is like,
totally.
now do you become too mainstream? Your label wants you to get on the radio, so now you're not the real Skrizzy Adams. You're not playing
that's
Dance with Darkness, like Tipping Point.
I mean, again, you don't really know, but yeah, that's totally possible.
Yeah, like do you sound like just a sellout, basically? Does Skrizzy Adams sell out? He gets a $10 million check.
I think one of the good things I will say about the record business right now is like A&R is becoming like a non-existent thing where they're not really doing much.
A&R, explain.
Artist and repertoire, like the guy who for Frank Sinatra, it's the guy who's picking the songs for Frank Sinatra and telling him. I mean, Frank Sinatra's probably doing it all himself, but like, I don't know how to explain it.
Like picking the song,
giving you notes, like helping you with your sound. You're the guy holding your hand at the record label, essentially.
Like your manager?
No, the manager has something to do with that. A&R's artist and repertoire. A&R's the guy who signs you and the guy who helps you make your album.
Gotcha.
In
some
some
cases, your
cases,
right hand.
Yeah, in some cases they do absolutely nothing. In some cases they do everything. But nowadays, like, that's called artist development, where they take the 15-year-old girl and she gets vocal lessons and studio time, and 3 years later she's Britney Spears. Like, the days of that are over. That doesn't really happen anymore. Nowadays, it's like, you got to hit single. Is it blowing up on TikTok? Sign the paperwork.
Right.
So in that case, I think it's not like an issue. You know.
Talk to me through this.
Hit me.
If let's say I'm a record label.
Sure.
I say, Skrizz, let's sit down. Let's talk about how we can work together. Okay. What are the big points that you would ask today? Being 30-year-old Skrizz, shout out, it was just your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
How was the aquarium?
I actually didn't go.
You didn't go to the aquarium?
I just went to AC, yeah. We'll go on that off camera.
All right, anyway, so anyway, you're sitting down with me. Yeah. What are like the main 3 or 1 or whatever many questions that you would ask today that 22-year-old Skrizz would ask?
I know exactly. Well, number 1, are we doing back catalog? Are we doing current catalog? Or are we doing future catalog? What are we focused on?
Back catalog, like so it's old songs.
Old songs, yeah. Old songs. Okay, my first album's Young Man. Are we choosing to, like, I recently met with a label and they're like, oh, you have several hits off, whatever. Like, they might be old, but we think they can still be hits. So are we doing that? That's a huge factor. If they buy those, I can no longer receive monthly paychecks from them. So I need to know if you're going to break. That's a huge thing. Number 2 is like, are we doing current catalog? Or can I finish where I'm at, finish my album cycle, and we're going to start fresh together? That's the number 1 thing I care about. The price between essentially buying 3 albums and buying 1 album is a massive difference. So I need to know that. Essentially, it's like if you buy 3 albums from me, I'm never going to receive a monthly paycheck again. So you bet, and so that's like, so say they want 3 albums. So then I need to know, like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, like, are we working an album essentially what is like, are we doing radio? If you're doing radio, are you really doing radio? Is it going to happen? Are we going to fail? Like, are we doing touring? Like, am I going to be an opening act for huge things all the time? These are things I can't do on my own. These are just simple touring and radio. I can't do it on my own. I mean, like, huge touring.
Isn't that the job of a manager in a way?
No, there's nothing to do with the manager.
Like the way I look, I hear you talking about like a record label. Basically, like they're your VP of sales in like the business world. Like they're selling you to play the show, to get on this radio station. They're just selling you to get into this market.
The main thing that they have, like, so I don't want to drop any names, is there's like a handful of people in the music business that just have more power than anything on earth.
Of course. And
it's like, I can go to a bunch of people that want to invest in me, collect $1 million at a great interest rate, like not a 700% interest rate, like a 2% interest rate or something like that. And I still can't do what signing with Mr. Z, we'll call him, can do, because he's just that powerful. You know what I mean? When I go to radio, he calls the radio. And that's just the difference. So that's just what you get. That's like, you need one of those guys in your court. And that's something you can't buy. Or some guys just blow up so much off a fan base, they never need to do that.
Hypothetically, let's take throw me one of your old songs that you think should have 10x the amount of streams it has.
I'm not qualified to answer that.
I'll just say that. Let's just say Tipping Point. You know, that's
Sure.
Would you trade Tipping Point having 10x the streams on Spotify, let's just say, or just in general?
So say 100 million streams.
Let's say 100 million streams for Tipping Point.
Sure.
But you don't make $1 off of it. Or where it is today.
I know the exact answer to that question. Great question. For me, and I was actually talking about this in a record deal that, whatever. For for me, it was like I didn't want to give up a full album. Like I would keep 9 records and give up 1, knowing I was taking a financial. So yes, I would take a financial L in order for a success L, as long as I wasn't giving up all the B-sides. Does that make sense? Because the B-sides are going to pay for everything else.
Right.
If Tipping Point's hitting 100 million streams, the trickle down is going to be crazy.
Of course.
So it's like, let's say they were going to buy it for something ridiculous, like 25K or something like that, and the recoupment just didn't make any sense. And yeah, I would do it. Definitely. That seems like a good play.
Interesting.
Big old record, be a plaque. I like plaques. So.
How many plaques? I've seen a couple plaques in here.
Just 2. No. Yeah. All right. Good question. So let's pivot. We're kind of running long here. What is the most shocking thing in the startup world?
I'm not going to use this. There could be the same version of the shocking versions for the startup world for raising money, but I won't use that as an example. The example I guess I'll use is just a lot of, and this is probably in a lot of industries, but just there's a lot of fluff in general. Like,
what do you mean fluff?
Especially in the tech startup world, but really all worlds.
Sure.
Everyone tries to paint a picture like everything is roses, we're on the rise.
I mean, that's every industry. That's literally the CEO on the phone is like, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do then.
But especially in the tech startup world, because a lot of it is like the picture, where if you can paint the picture that you're growing and you're scaling and everything's amazing, then you raise your next capital, then you get this massive
Have
exit.
you seen this show, what's this show?
Silicon Valley?
Where they essentially got all the bots and they did all this fake stuff, and then the investors all came.
Exactly.
And then he just nerds out and breaks it. He's like, it's fake.
So much of that shit, and you talk to these people like I had a
fake till you make it.
Yeah, a woman come up to
the rap business.
Yeah, a friend of mine in the industry. She was telling me how all the externally everyone thinks they're on top of the world. She's like, this company just gave me this massive check. Little do they know, everything's fucking breaking in the background, and no one's even seen this.
It's awful.
And I'm like, that is awful. But it happens far more than you realize. And it's a little bit ugly. It's a lot ugly. I mean, I think it's called Theranos. I forgot. I don't know if you ever heard of that company. They basically said that.
There's a documentary. It's amazing. With what's her name?
Yeah, well, I can't remember.
She's an evil woman. That was a raging bitch.
She was like the total con
The whole thing was
artist.
a total disaster.
Total con. It was
was like a huge level scam. But the thing is, it wasn't a scam because she believed it.
Yeah,
that was the crazy part.
That's not that uncommon. There was a company.
She literally she was a sociopath. She had herself fooled that this was going to work. But the part that blew my mind with that one was she had no history in medicine. Like at all. Like people go to school for like 12 years to learn medicine, and she's gonna revolutionize the medical field.
Well, we all want to believe the story. We all want to believe the dream. We all want to believe it's possible, but there are true sociopaths out there. I don't know who she is. I don't want to, whatever.
She's going to jail.
I mean, she's going to jail. She did some fucked up stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not like I've heard other examples. There's a great company. Obviously, I'm not going to mention it in Chicago, blowing up. They were like the top company. All of a sudden, bam, they found out everything was a lie. Everything they were sharing with their advertisers was a lie. And they went from being the hottest company to, I don't know if they're still around, but they got in quite a bit of trouble just because they were
That's
just
fraud.
Fraud. I mean, look what happened during the financial crisis. Like, it's not a new concept, but when you open up the hood, you realize that. So for me, I'm like so aware of that, and I never ever want to be that I'm so conscious of that with everything I do.
But what's the point? Like, what are you accomplishing?
Well,
I think they believe that they can fake it till they make it, where it's like they're going to be fraudulent and get enough funding that they can get it over the hump,
Yeah, or you just pass the buck, and finally you pass. It's like a hot potato.
You think they're doing it for money?
I don't know what motivates them, but it could be. Sure, money, fame, power. Like, what's motivated people since the caveman days? Sex, there you go. Money, fame, power, sex, everything.
That's it. Interesting. Well, sounds good. I think we're going to wrap it up from here, man. Listeners, you guys rock.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.